Welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. My name is Amir. I'm joined today by Martel. You can find him at the Miami Heat Zone podcast. And we have a returning guest back on the show. We got Matt from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. How's it going, Matt?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Excited to talk to you specifically. I know you were active the last few days regarding
Yeah.
the Miami Heat draft. And of course, the Miami Heat got some good guys after the draft. So some undrafted guys are specialty. So excited to talk to you a little more about that. But first things first, in the offseason, the biggest thing that we were waiting on was the Jimmy Butler extension. And I've been asking guests what their prediction would be in terms of that scenario and what they wanted the outcome to be. And so I thought the Heat were going to cave in this offseason and give him an extension, but I thought they would negotiate perhaps and kind of shave maybe $10-13 million off that $113 million, technically one extra year on that extension piece. But um, yeah, the Miami Heat said they were going to take a wait and see approach, and I thought Jimmy Butler would be possibly disgruntled, and we knew that him and Bernie Lee were going to ask for that max on July 7th, and he seems to be okay waiting. And so Jimmy Butler is technically going to most likely become a free agent with the intent of, signing with the Miami Heat. So we're going to see Jimmy Butler next season, hopefully in a contract year, playing maybe 65 to 70 games and giving some hopefully all out effort. So did you predict this was how it was going to end up, Matt? Like, what are your thoughts just on this whole Jimmy extension piece?
I didn't think this was going to shape out the way that I thought. I'm with you. I thought they were going to give him the extension. I thought they were going to just give him the full max. I didn't think it would come right away, but I thought it'd probably come within 1 to 2 weeks because obviously you want to see how the rest of your roster shapes out and you want to make decisions at a fairly fast pace there. But um, I'm a little surprised. I wonder. This reads to me that they didn't want to offer it to him, and if he's just like, you know what, I'm gonna play out this year and see what happens after the fact because Shams did say that he wasn't going to sign with any other team, so there's really no point. Not no point in trading him, but obviously you're getting pennies on the dollar if you do decide to trade him if you're Miami for some reason. Um, and so it is a little weird to me. He's betting on himself in some form or fashion. Like it's not a complete it's not completely atypical that athletes do this, but at the same time, Jimmy is going to be 35 soon, I believe, and he just is coming off a sprained MCL, and he's dealt with multiple lower body injuries, and he's only played 60 games twice in 5 years with Miami. Like, there's a lot of things working against him in terms of like maintaining your health and staying healthy, because that's the worry. Like that there's an injury risk to playing out a contract year when you're a max player because as soon as you get hurt, that value can plummet, especially when you're entering the wrong side of 30. So this is a really interesting approach. He is able to get more money next year, next offseason. And so that from a business standpoint, that does make sense. But based on the other circumstances of where he's at in his career and what he's just coming off of, it's a little bit of an interesting approach and not necessarily something that I expected.
Yeah, he can
So
get the third year, right? Sorry, I was gonna say
Yeah,
because
no,
he can get 3 to 4 years now, right? Versus the 2 year extension technically, right? So I think
it would
it
be
makes
three. Yeah.
yeah.
Because there's like the over 38 rule, and I think he would turn 38, and so you can't get a 4 year deal, I don't believe. Or maybe he can because he's with the team. I'm not completely knowledgeable with that, but at least 3 years
Okay.
next off season. But it's like it's you're just giving him more and more money later in his career. And like obviously if you're him, you want as much money as you can on your way out the door. But it's just whether the franchise is willing to give it to you or not. And it's a make it or break year for him in Miami.
so then what should the Miami Heat do going forward? Because you know he's going to definitely play maybe just a little bit more competitive. Because my thing about Jimmy Butler is I never necessarily wanted him to play 82 games, but can you just play and actually try in the games that you're actually playing in? So going forward, like, are you willing to give Jimmy Butler that extension? Because he is getting older, and I really do think that I don't see the Miami Heat trading Jaime or Jovic unless it's for a really big star. That means that they're going to be leaning into the Bama to buy a window. So let's say we do keep Jimmy Butler, like, how do we move forward with him?
I think first order of operations, and this is like the popular thing, but you probably move off of Tyler at this point. For what necessarily? You just hopefully you can find a deal where you get more complementary pieces. His value isn't as high as it once was, just because of the contract, because of the performance last year, the health concerns that he's had. I mean, he played 42 games last year or something like that. Like he can't stay on the court. And so I think you have to move off of that contract and kind of have some. You kind of have to have some salary relief there, because you're probably not getting unless you're taking on a bad contract back, you're probably not getting some star or something like that for him specifically. So hopefully you're able to find more complementary pieces. I'm interested to see what they do with Duncan now that they drafted Pele Larson, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about, or what they do with Terry Rozier, who has the neck injury. I just wonder if you're looking to move off of them for some reason, if you're finding a good deal, my question is, what do league executives think about them and their recent injuries? Because it's like Duncan has the back injury. It's not something that you can ever fully recover from for him, and he's now he's getting older.
He's
He's
30.
not old yet.
Is
Yeah,
he
he's
30
not
yet?
old yet, but he's getting older. And that's just something like when you have a serious back injury for professional athletes, not very many of them recover or look the same after the fact. And then Terry with the neck injury, it came out of left field, but we heard that he was in a neck brace on media day. We haven't heard a thing since. Or at least I haven't heard a thing since. And so I don't know what they do with that and how healthy he'll be next year. You hope he's healthy, but I just wonder what executives and people think about that. Because I'm with you. I don't think they trade Jovic or Hawkins either. I think they think highly of those guys, and I think they will be legitimately good players, good rotation players. Jovic, in this case, last year was a starter for almost half the season. So I think there's an indication that they think highly of him. And then same thing with Hawkins, who is kind of like that Jimmy-esque player. He's the facsimile of Jimmy Butler. And so I'm interested to see how they go about it. It's probably going to be some minor moves, and hopefully you're able to get a good player on a minimum in free agency. I don't know what the exact answer is, because there's so many variables to it.
So do you think that we'll be able to get, because people mention all these different stars like Trae Young, Lauri Markkanen, Brandon Ingram, Donovan Mitchell. Do you really see any of those as a possibility for the Miami Heat?
I don't think Mitchell at this point. There is a lot of smoke around him re-signing that extension, and I think he ultimately will re-sign. I think the most realistic one in my head, you can maybe get. I mean, not that I'm saying I'm a huge fan or anything, but you can get Brandon Ingram, I think, for a cheaper cost than what's perceived out there, because I don't know how many teams want to give him the max. Not to say that Miami will give him the max, but if that's something that they decide to do, I would at least look at it. Trae Young is a popular one. I think they're going to part with one of Trae Young or DeJounte Murray. I don't know who. I think Trae could also be had for a somewhat cheaper cost, because I don't think his value is as high as it once was, and he would be a guy that it would be a little bit of a weird fit, because he is a small guard. He's not great defensively, but he'd have dealt with Kendrick Nunn in the past. They can deal with Trae Young, who is a much better offensive player, a guy who can make life easier for Bam, and your new center that you just drafted, KEL'EL Ware, and then in addition to make life a little bit easier for Jimmy and the ancillary pieces around him. And so I think that could be one to at least consider. I was never big on the Lauri Markkanen one, just because you're dealing with Danny Ainge, that it's just hard to negotiate with someone who you hate. I'm trying to think of any others that are off the top of my head. I mean, someone's going to be disgruntled at some point. Someone's going to ask for a trade, and we saw what happened last offseason. Not that you want that to happen again. or at
So
least that whole process. But
So second part question too is do you think that the Miami Heat got Jimmy Butler like enough help within these past few years? Because I know a lot of people say that they didn't, but then at the same time Jimmy Butler really never held Kyle Lowry accountable. Like I know that I always say this every video, but there's a lot of people that say that they never got Jimmy help, but technically they did. It really just didn't work out.
that's what I think. That's what I think. I mean, they've tried to. I mean, again, we're coming off of an offseason where they tried to trade for Dame, and everything happened so late to where they couldn't really react and do anything else, which was unfortunate. And but I do think they've tried, but I am also with you that it's just been like they've just come up short. But you've also run into teams like LA in the bubble and Denver who are just more talented than you. They're more well-rounded than you, and they're bigger than you. And so they're not perfect, but I don't think they haven't improved the roster over Jimmy's tenure. And so hopefully you're able to swing something this offseason to get it back in your favor a little bit.
Yeah, we've definitely helped Jimmy. Are you kidding me? Dwayne Dedman, Jay Crowder, Iguodala, age 38.
No, but Matt. We don't.
Jay
talk
Crowder was
about-
good though.
No, but
Yeah, I know, but still.
No, but Matt, we got Kyle Lowry because of Jimmy. And
Yeah.
I know that you remember Jimmy went to the press conference and says Kyle Lowry's not going anywhere. We're not trading him, correct? So then now how can he now turn around and say that, oh, well, we never gave Jimmy Butler help? He wanted Kyle Lowry here at $90 million on our books.
And I
And
don't
he
think they
never-
wanted that third year.
And he never held Kyle Lowry accountable the way he did Tyler, Duncan, and Bam, correct?
Yeah.
That's all I got to say about
But he's
that.
not. But Jimmy's not complaining either. He's saying he wants to stay in Miami. He loves Miami and all that stuff. So like he understands. Like he probably thinks, okay, the front office did get me my friend. Players fall off cliffs to a certain degree. Like like
No, but
Kyle
he didn't
Lowry.
even try, though.
Yeah, yeah. He
You
already has
would
a
have had a
championship, I guess.
1-year window with Kyle,
Yeah.
or like a 1.5-year win, and you didn't. You unfortunately came short in the Eastern Conference Finals against Boston in Game 7. That's just the unfortunate reality, and it wasn't really the same after that for him. I mean, they made the finals, but like for Kyle Lowry specifically,
It's hard to win championships.
it's really hard. I don't
Shit
think that's what
happens.
people realize. Like it's
They
really,
don't.
really, really hard. But you also, you have to have a really good team, like top 10 offense, top 5, top 10 defense. Like you have to make sure your stars are playing like they're top 10 players in the league. You got to have functional size. You got to have shooting. You got to have really good coaching. You need a little bit of luck.
A lot of bit of luck too. All of what you said plus like a good amount of luck. Like there's a lot of luck too,
including
just
injury
with-
luck.
Yeah.
Including injury luck.
including the injury luck, and like even like luck as in like you could be like the 15th rank 3-point shooting team and like all of a sudden in the playoffs be the hottest shooting team, right? Like the Heat technically did that like one season, right? Like I think that was the season against where we lost in the ECF against Boston, right?
Well, no, that was well, I mean, remember they
no.
were one of the worst 3-point shooting teams when they made the 8 seed. And then all of a sudden they play Milwaukee.
Oh, so that was
last year.
That was 2 seasons ago. Yeah, last year or 2 seasons, not this last season, the season before.
Yeah, they cooled off a little bit, but they still made the finals as an 8 seed.
Okay. Well, let's transition real quick, but I do want to touch up on like the Ingram piece real quick and the hero stuff you guys mentioned earlier. Because so Ingram's in a final year of his contract, $36 million. Are we willing to do like Tyler Hero perhaps and like a sweetener? And I don't know if that sweetener is like a Jovic or Jaime for a 1-year rental. Because again, like why would we trade for him, to your point, if we're not going to give him that max and have him long term? Like we're not going to, like, I do Tyler for Brandon Ingram for on a flyer because we get off the 4 or 3 years that Tyler has left, because the amount of money based on this next TV deal is going to be insane. Okay, I got an alert 30 minutes ago before you hopped on. Emmanuel Quickly just got $175 million for 5 years. You know what that equals to? $35 million. He's making the same next year as Brandon Ingram. Basically, more than Ingram made in 3 of his first years, like 3 years of that 5-year deal right there. So what do you think Brandon Ingram is going to make? A guy who's a 23 points per game scorer, one-time All-Star. Like if Quickly's making 36, he's asking for 55, right?
Yeah,
Like so
that's the
I don't know
issue.
if I want to commit there perhaps, but and you mentioned earlier about Tyler Hero too, possibly being moved this offseason. Like, what are your thoughts? I talked to Martell about this a few days ago. What do you think about like getting some of the Nets guys? Like, assuming they go on a fire sale, um, Tyler straight up for a Cam Johnson, like he's making 23. We get relief in terms of 7 million in salary right there, or possibly even doing Schroeder and Finney Smith, who make 27 million, 28 million, which is still below what Tyler makes. Like,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on like the Nets, like in those like assets? Because they even said Bogdanovich, who age 35 still averaged 20 points per game with Detroit before he got traded to the Knicks. Like, what are your thoughts on the Nets pieces and like trading Tyler to get like one or two of those guys?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't remember if I've actually said it on this show or if I've said it elsewhere, but like I've been a proponent of like Tyler for DFS and something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or like
Royce O'Neal was like one of the options last season,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
with him.
Before he got traded to Phoenix.
Yep.
But like, yeah, I mean, I don't mind either of those deals. Like, I think Cam is a better fit than Tyler is. I don't know if he's the better player, but he's the better fit. And I think that's what you're looking for when it comes to a Tyler Hero trade. If you're trading not just for one player, but multiple players, is just complementary fits. Like, how do they fit around Jimmy and Bam? That's really what you're thinking about. You're not trying to get, I mean, if you can get a better player than Tyler in a Tyler deal, awesome. That's great. No one's going to complain about that. But that's not really the reality that you're looking at right now. And I think DFS, I don't hate the DFS Schroeder package. I'd have to look deeper into like who else is on the roster. I mean, uh, I know they just gave Claxton a lot of money for some reason. Um, I don't hate the Cam Johnson thing. Like I wouldn't. I mean, he's making a lot of money. I wouldn't hate taking a flyer on Bogey. Should you get like you're buying low there? Um, I don't know if I would do that for Tyler specifically, but like I don't hate the thought of it. And so like there's definitely ways that you can do it with that Nets team, and I think that those are reasonable packages for him because again, you're probably getting 70 cents on the dollar for him, and they're not going to give him up for nothing. But I think they're complementary. Like those are complementary pieces, and those are good enough to justify a Tyler Hero trade, even though he is 23 years old, even though he can still improve. But I don't know if that's going to happen in this current Heat context, and I don't know if it ever will if he continues to be on the team.
Yeah, I think more likely 50 cents on the dollar at this point. But even to your point, Tyler's still young and he still possibly has some upside. It might not be with this Miami Heat team, and it doesn't necessarily mean that he needs to go to a bad team and become like a Jordan Poole shot chucker, inefficient. Like he still has room for growth, like it's just a different environment, different team, different situation can do wonders for certain players. So let's transition to the draft, Matt. So day one, Miami Heat selected KEL'EL WARE, which personally I'm okay with. I'm happy with. I don't follow college, so um, I knew there was guys within a range that we were going to be looking at, and there's lots of holes across this roster. We need a backup big, we need a backup point guard, and we possibly need a wing once Caleb, officially opts out and tests free agency, and then Haywood. I know we're negotiating with him right now, and I know we had the ability to do so after the finals. And it's mutual that they want to stay, but like, how much are we willing to pay him, right? So like, he could be gone. Um, I don't know. I'm hoping he'll take the mid level at 5 and say, hey, like if a team gives you 8, no state income tax in Florida, like 8 million there equals 5 million here. Take the MLE. Even so, I don't even know if I would want to give that to him per se. Who knows? But there's lots of holes in the roster. They went with the big in the first round. So, what are your thoughts on Ware? And then, of course, the second round picks and the undrafteds, Palel, and who else do we get? Kashad Johnson
Yeah,
as well. What are your thoughts just on?
they drafted Larson at 44, and then yeah, Keyshawn, Zion Pullen, Isaiah Stevens, Bryson Moore. Like I think the undrafted guys are coming in at a slower rate this year because summer league doesn't start until a later date. It starts July 6th. Usually it starts like right after July 1st, or it's like July 1st, July 2nd. And I think the 2-day window also helped with that. But I think we're probably going to see more undrafted signees in the coming days or in the coming hours, probably. But those are coming in at a lower rate. But on Ware's interesting to me. I mean, because he wasn't a guy that I was particularly like. He wasn't high on my personal board heading into the draft. He was the guy that I liked throughout college, but the thing with him, the biggest knock on him was his motor. And that's typically like when you're looking at prospects and you're looking like, all right, strengths, weaknesses, so on and so forth. Like motor is a red flag. Like if he was allegedly called lazy at Oregon when he was there as a freshman. He was the number 7 player in his recruiting class. Like he's an uber talented player. But at the same time, I didn't have him high on my personal board because again, I'm not in those interviews. I'm not conducting those workouts. Like I don't know what's being said or like because I mean, that stuff's gonna follow him. It followed him throughout his tenure in Indiana. It's gonna follow him throughout the pre-draft process. But if there's a single organization to get the most out of a player, and if there's a single organization to take a bet on someone who has allegedly a low motor, like it's the Miami Heat, and they've made a calculated risk, but at the same time, like he averaged a double-double last year with motor concerns. Like he averaged 16 and 10 with Mike Woodson, and I think he did a lot to mitigate those concerns. And he's an exceptional shot blocker. He's a good athlete, 7'1" with a 7'5" wingspan. He killed the work, or he killed the combine. Like he was awesome during just like the testing stuff. I mean, yeah, basketball is a lot more than just like what you can do in like the lane agility time or whatever, like the vertical or whatever. But like he's an athletic player.
Yeah.
They're not. I don't expect them to play him next to Bam, but I think that's probably in the future because I don't think they're just drafting him to be a backup center for his entire career.
No, I agree.
But like, when's the last time the Miami have had an athletic 7-footer?
Joel Anthony. I'm just kidding. He was like 6'9".
Like
horrible. No
exactly.
one.
Like
No one ever. I mean, because Whiteside wasn't like very mobile. No, he was buff. Like he was strong as hell, but he wasn't an athlete.
Like KEL'EL Ware is a legit athlete, and he's got some shooting touch to him. Yeah, when you look at the 40% from 3 last year, it was on very low volume. He only took 13% of his shots from beyond the arc, but he showed the potential, and like he doesn't have bad form. Like someone pointed this out to me yesterday. Has a little bit of like Kristaps in his form. If you go back and watch it, like a little bit of Kristaps in it. But he's going to need to pack on strength. But like he's a legit athlete with legit length, and it's like if you're taking a flyer on him at 15, like I'm perfectly okay with that.
Were you upset we didn't pick Connect though? When Connect, because like Connect again, I don't really pay attention. Yeah, I don't pay attention to college.
A little bit, and he and De Silva were the 2 guys off the top. Were ones that I liked a lot during the pre-draft process, and it was just like, okay, the Miami Heat have notoriously been a team that, outside of the Justice Winslow draft, they don't draft based on like who's falling to them or who's falling in that. Like they have a board, they stick to their board. Their board's different than the consensus board, and it's different from other teams' boards. They stuck with their board. Adam Simon even said after the fact that he was higher than 15 on their board. That probably says something about how they thought of him and how he killed that workout when he was in Miami. Like, I don't know. I'm led to believe that this is going to work and they're going to get the most out of him despite having the motor concerns. But again, you're taking a flyer on like a legit athletic 7-footer. I don't know how much you can complain about that, given what we've seen with Thomas freaking Bryant and Orlando Robinson and Dwayne Dedman. Like it's hard to the bar is so low, but now that they can get to do, like if they can squeeze everything out of them, that ceiling is really high for them, I believe.
So what do you think about Larson? Because I think that he's a phenomenal 3-point shooter, and we could potentially either see, Tyler or even Duncan being traded now that we have a 6'6" guy who's athletic, great 3-point shooter, playmaker, and a decent, defender. But then also too, same thing like with Kashad Johnson. I think he's a jump out the gym type player. He's a guy that's a great defender. He uses his athleticism. All of his highlights are pretty much, slam dunks. So what do you think about those 2 guys before we close?
I don't think people realize how athletic Keyshawn Johnson is. And I say that because I watched him a lot at San Diego State when he was there. Jump shot was a little bit broken when he was there. He improved it a lot at Arizona. But he's a legit freak athlete. He's a sturdy 225 pounds. Like he's not a pushover by any means. He's 6'6" with a 6'10" wingspan. He's got really broad shoulders. He's quick enough to handle smaller guards, but he's also big enough to hold up against bigger wings and even some bigs defensively. Like he's a very versatile player. He's excellent in the pick and roll defensively. He's very smart off the ball, and then like in transition, Tommy Lloyd at Arizona, like they preach dudes running down the floor and like like getting in like semi transition and in transition. Like he was always one of the first guys down the floor, and he's just again to your point, he's a jump out of the gym. I mean, he had a 42-inch max vert. That was tied for the best at the combine. Like he's strong as hell, but he's bouncy as a you know what. And then with Pele Larson, like he's just a do it all player. Like he can do. He's not going to do one thing phenomenally well. I mean, probably his shooting, but like he's not going to. His box score numbers aren't going to jump off the page. Like he averaged 13, 4, and 4 last year. Like that's not gonna jump off the page to anyone. But he's a very cerebral player. He's a very smart player. He can be a secondary creator in an offense. He's a lights out shooter. He shot 40% from three his entire collegiate career, including 42, 43% last year on decent volume. He's a good passer. He's a good rebounder. He's a competitive defender. Like he's willing to take on the tough challenges, and he can probably guard 2 to 3 different positions. Like he's a legit player to get at 44. And he was someone who I was high on throughout the pre-draft because it's like he is 23. He may not have huge upside, but again, he's a cerebral player that plays within the flow of the offense and can just do a little bit of everything. And he's, to your point, he's athletic. He had a 38-inch max vert. He's not he doesn't look like the most explosive player in the world, but like he's deceptively strong and he's a good athlete. Like that's not something you can complain about in addition to what he can provide from a shooting standpoint at 44 that late in the draft. It's just hard to complain about that. And I think he could legit be potentially a rotation player as a rookie. Again, it's too early to say because I want to see how this roster shakes out. But he's definitely someone that I liked a lot. And I don't think he's going to be Max or Tyler but I think he could be a viable replacement should they move on from either of those two players over the coming weeks.
Yep. You answered part of my question. I was going to say for these Zona boys, are they going to be able to crack the rotation, or are they going to be, at Sioux Falls, for most of the year? Like, so you kind of answered that piece right there. Do you think Kashad can crack the rotation? Like, is it going to be based on, I guess, availability and injuries like throughout the season? Like, what are your thoughts on that before we close?
I think he can. I don't think it's going to be like a crazy amount that he plays, only because it's like I'm guessing it'll probably be based off of injuries or somewhat. Like because I mean, I think they want to develop his offensive game a little bit more, like because he's not someone who can really put the ball on the floor. He's not that great of a playmaker. Like he improved his shot last year, but I want to see a bigger sample of it from him.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they will really like and want to keep him just because of what he can do defensively, his versatility defensively, and also athletically. Like he's got the physical gifts, and so like I think they want to keep that and kind of refine his game offensively because again, he wasn't a guy that could really put the ball on the floor. He does not have a good handle. He's not a great playmaker. Like he's a guy like offensively, he's gonna be like a spot up guy. Should his shot be consistent, in addition to what he can do as like potentially as a screener or as a cutter, just because he's so freaking athletic. He's a guy that you can put at either dunker spot and him just be like a handoff or not a handoff, but like a dump off hub. He could be a guy that's a lob threat. Like those are ways that they can use him offensively, but I think they still want to refine the offensive skill set. And so if I were to make a bet, I think he starts the season in Sioux Falls, but who knows?
Sounds like a buffer DJJ, a stronger, bigger DJJ kind of role for us, right? Replacement. So I'm okay with that. And so like the last thing, because you're closer to Sioux Falls. Like obviously you and Major have your podcast. So if you guys haven't checked out their podcast, obviously plug it when we close. But what does this mean for the other two-way players? Like I know we have 15. You have 15 standard contracts. How many two-way players can you have again? Was it 3 or 4?
Three.
Like what?
Three.
3. Okay, 3. So what does this mean for Kane and for Swider and for Alondes? Like, do they crack that? Like, do they get these? Who gets the two ways? Like from the second round and the undrafted guys we just selected this year?
I think they also signed. I think they signed Zion Poland to the two-way. Again,
Yeah.
you can manipulate your two ways as much as you want. It doesn't affect your cap or anything, so it's not like Miami's like hooked to these guys forever. I mean, they've been a team that they shift their two ways around, but it does raise an eyebrow with what they do with potentially not Alonda specifically, but with Kane and Swider. Because Kane's been a two-way, I think, for the last 2 years. I think at some point he's going to be like, I want a standard contract or I'm out. Again, I don't know him personally. I don't know his agency personally, but that's just like what I'm guessing is the case. And then with Swider, it's like he's going to be entering his third year, his fourth year. Like he was much improved as a rebounder last year in Sioux Falls, and he knocked down 50% of his threes, like just an insane efficiency. But I wonder, he may be the guy that's competing for the two-way spot as summer ends and fall approaches. Like I wonder what's the case, because I mean, if you listen to him in his exit interview, at least it seemed to me that they were willing to give him not give him another chance, but like continue to work with him throughout the offseason, potentially build up the skill set for another two-way contract next year. But since 2 of those two ways are already taken up and we don't even know what the summer league roster looks like, it raises an eyebrow of what they actually think. Because I mean, the pipeline for Miami, they had plenty of guys get plucked last year at Sioux Falls to two ways, like Jamari Bouye, Malik Williams, Drew Peter. Like they had a lot of guys who were plucked away. And so their pipeline isn't the best right now, if I'm being completely honest. Like they don't have the Max Strus or the Gabe Vincent or the Duncan. Like they don't have those guys right now, at least ones that you can foresee outside of maybe Alondas, even though he has a different skill set than those guys I just mentioned. But I wonder, just again, depending on what happens the rest of the offseason, I wonder if Alondas signs, or at least he makes the roster, depending on what happens this summer. And there's like a competition for that third two-way spot, or I don't know, maybe Zion or maybe Keyshawn, they don't impress as much and they don't get the two-way. I don't know. It was just very interesting to me how they signed, or at least reportedly, 2 two-way contracts
immediately
right at the draft.
Yeah.
I don't know. It makes me raise an eyebrow. It makes me think the future guy, or the future for the guys that we just had on two ways, is a little bit more bleak than we may think in terms of them being in a Heat uniform.
Exactly. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining the podcast once again. Really appreciate the time. Before we hop off, do you want to let the audience know more about the podcast, like I mentioned earlier, and just where they can find you online?
It's called The Force with Matt and Major. We tried to get creative with our podcast name, failed miserably, and so that's kind of what we rocked with. Him and I we talked Sky Force. We did a little bit of draft stuff previously. I don't think I mentioned Pele Larson or KEL'EL WARE, so that's on me. But nah, man, The Force with Matt and Major, Bright and Hot Hoops, Vendetta Sports Media, Mountain West Connection. I'm all over the place on Twitter at mph_824_. I don't know why I had such a complicated handle. I did this like 3 or 4 years ago, and I've just kind of stuck with it ever since. But yeah, man, I'm all over the place doing a lot of different things. I'm excited for free agency and all the off-season chaos right after the draft a few days from now.
Martel, anything you want to close with, sir?
Make sure you guys like, share, comment, subscribe, and thank you for all the support.
When you said Mountain West, I was